Hello, and welcome to Design to Manifest, the podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Wentworth. Design to Manifest features conversations with creatives, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, healers, and visionaries who have turned their ideas into reality. Hello, and welcome to Design to Manifest, a podcast about the intentional and sometimes unexpected ways people design the life and work they were meant to create. Each week, I talk with creatives, entrepreneurs, and visionaries about how their inspiration turned into reality. Joining me today is Adam Waldman, owner and creative director of the Refinery Creative, an industry-leading entertainment marketing agency behind some of your favorite movie posters and digital campaigns. What started nearly 20 years ago as a dream in a living room has grown into a powerhouse team of 100 sharp-minded, passionate, and creatives, many of whom have been by Adam's side for most of that journey. Beyond the studio, Adam is a devoted husband to his lovely wife, Amy, and an active member of the Los Angeles chapter of the Young Presidents Organization, where leaders come together to grow personally and professionally. He is also a passionate advocate, lending his voice and leadership to multiple organizations working to end homelessness in Los Angeles and beyond. If you've ever wondered what it looks like to manifest a creative empire from the ground up while staying grounded, kind, and connected, you are in for a real treat. Adam, welcome to Design to Manifest. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Kat. I appreciate it, and I'm honored to be here.
So, Adam, when I have my special guests on, which you are so special, you do so many different things, I always ask them, what does Design to Manifest mean to you?
It's a lovely open-ended question, and to me, what it means is making a plan, having a vision, and then manifesting that definitely in action, but also in energy and just drawing that reality to you. I created and planned and then manifested. That's my answer.
I always say if you want something, you have to design it. If you want a house, you have to design it before you build it. If you want a dress, you have to design the pattern. You have to design things. And then sometimes maybe along the way, things don't go exactly how you had planned. But I know this wonderful story of your lovely wife. You manifested her, but it wasn't necessarily in the timing that you thought originally, I think. I just love designing, having the intention, and then also manifesting as in letting the universe create
Mhm.
the perfect scenario. So I want to take you way back to being a child. Can you just tell me, like, were you a creative? Were you an entrepreneur? Like, what were you like as a kid?
Only child growing up of divorced parents and left to my own devices quite a bit. Found a lot of empty space in the world that sort of led me to live in a bit of a fantasy world, a lot of daydreams, a lot of, I can still think of some of my childhood, like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, daydreams about, it was always some James Bond world or something, But I think that that was how I started to sort of hone in on being creative and creating something from nothing. And then if you flash forward to high school, I got very into visual design and graphic design album covers that really resonated with me. A designer named Vaughn Oliver and a company that he had called 23 Envelope, which did all of everyone's favorite goth albums,
So
Susie and the
cool.
Banshees or the Cocteau Twins or all these things. And he had a very specific design aesthetic, and I just absorbed it, whether I was music first and then design or design first and music as a side effect. That really informed a lot of how I chose to see graphics and graphic design and a lot of my aesthetic. So that was high school. Um,
So you've
and
always
then
really like gravitated towards things that were avant-garde. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Northern California. My mom was and still is in Oakland, which is where I spent most of my time. My father moved to Mendocino, which is about 3.5 hours north of the Bay Area on the coast. Beautiful, rugged, rural. Then my younger years were spent in India in a village outside of Mumbai, where my mom took me to live in an ashram for a few years. So
Wow. That
So
is
there you go.
incredible. What I'm hearing is that as a child, you had this creative part of you, and then you gravitated towards art. And then maybe growing up and spending time in India, you got to see how big the world was. For instance, I'll just give you a little of my background. So I grew up in
Yes.
Houston, Texas. And in Texas, all of my friends spent the whole summer watching TV inside because it was really hot and, you had to have a car to get around. I was lucky enough that my mother is Mexican, so we spent the summers in Mexico walking around the town, exploring, and I got to see how big the world was. So I moved to New York when I was 19, but just tell me a little bit about that experience being in the ashram and getting to see that bigger life.
Sure. It doesn't quite play that way in my narrative because this was much younger. I was 5 to when I was 8. And so that's a different lens. Your awareness of the world, even if you're in India, is much smaller. And so it's much more about friends and friendships, fear of strange worlds. And I don't think I was fearful, or at least I got over it quickly. That is maybe what I was referring to when I was talking about living in a daydream fantasy world. Man, I can tell you, I used to have this spaceship. Oh, I love this spaceship. And my spaceship, I wish I had one right here, was, I'm not kidding, and I played with it a lot, was the top of a blue Bic pen. And it was like, like this was a thing, and so you're just having to invent worlds when the world around you isn't relatable to you.
It's amazing.
So yeah.
For me, whenever I was really young, my parents are also divorced. We spent a lot of time indoors, like just, my brother and my sister. And I had to come up with ways to entertain them or entertain myself. And I think that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with
Mm.
music so much because music could transport me to a different reality. So, all of those things, for me at least, I think contributed to me becoming a DJ and then also not being scared to like take a chance because I didn't want to live in a living room in Houston, Texas my whole life. So, as a kid, whenever you got into high school and you got into art, from there, what did you do next? Did you go to college for it or learn it on your own?
A little of both, a bit of a hybrid. High school, got into doing design for friends, for t-shirts and stuff like that. And then went off to college thinking that I wanted to be a filmmaker and I wanted to direct and produce and write and, Lord help the world, act. And my parents were allergic to that idea. And so they made sure I went to a liberal arts school. So I kind of had to fake a degree in filmmaking under the guise of media studies and whatever sort of more esoteric research angles I could find. But I made movies and I made student films. And as part of that, returned to the graphic design that I'd been gravitating towards as a high school student and really fell in love with the process. And I am old enough that desktop publishing, which isn't even a term anymore, and graphic design on a Mac was at its infant stages. I mean, very early stages. And so I was really actually coming to it more from a geeking out over the technology and the capability and wanting to poke around on the computer and see what was possible. It's funny, I listened to a little bit of one of your other podcasts, and your guest was saying he was sort of the Alex P. Keaton in the family. And I've said the same about myself, that you come out of a family of hippies and of financial insecurity and of, you could even argue, food insecurity. You react however you react. And in my case, I felt very fearful about making money and about having a career and about stability. And I was very pragmatic about it. I made these movies, these short films. My big project, my big senior thesis project was supposed to be shot in 2 weekends or 3 weekends. And it took 4 months of misery and hell. And at the end of it, after I cut it and did all the stuff, it was embarrassing. And I still have not let my amazing wife watch the movie because I'm just mortified.
Aw.
And also, in the process of that, leaned in from the pragmatic lens on my interest in graphic design and technology and applied my playing around with the precursors of Photoshop, that's how long ago it was, to design a movie poster for my movie, and fell in love and was like, this is it. This is the thing for me. Because what came out of that was something I was proud of. It took me at the time 2 days to do. I still am proud of what I achieved 30 years ago. And the movie itself was garbage, but the poster that represented it was amazing. And I sort of looked at a future in being a filmmaker and a creative in entertainment. And creative, I mean director, actor, writer, producer. I looked at what that most likely looks like for people, which is at your peak, if you're Quentin Tarantino, you've done 9 movies in your entire career. 9 is not a big number. And the chances of 9 movies all being amazing, and you could argue not all 9 of Quentin Tarantino's are amazing, or M. Night Shyamalan, or pick a director, or Steven Spielberg has made some losers in his time. I know that's blasphemy, but Woody Allen is like the most prolific with like 40 movies. And so I just looked at my chances of being the next one of those guys, and it's pretty low chances. So I was in my liberal arts education up against people who'd gone to film school, who had access to hardware that I didn't. And I pivoted over to something I could control more. I could be more prolific with it. I loved the product. And the poster was, all I had to do was make a beautiful poster. It didn't matter how good or bad the movie was. And I still stand by that. You can bring your garbage movie to me and I will make the most beautiful piece of art for you. And I'll be as proud of that as I am of having done, the Matrix poster. I am proud of the work in for itself as a piece of art.
So inspiring, Adam. And if I can just comment on what you just said,
Yeah, please.
I believe, especially now, but even back in the, 60s, 70s, the artwork was always the thing that people first saw before they heard the music. Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, like all of these legendary, you don't even sometimes know what songs are on the album, but you know the artwork on the
Yeah.
album.
I'll jump ahead just to keep on that topic, and I'd be interested to hear your reactions to this take because I talk to students about designing key art, movie posters, and what a sort of limited sandbox we work in. And that if you have a horror movie, you know the tools in the toolbox to make a horror movie poster, a rom-com, a drama, a science fiction film. The audience looks at a movie poster and they know what kind of movie they're going to get usually. And that can be limiting. You could argue that that's less open field creative, but it's also helpful as a piece of marketing. And when I'm talking to students and talking about careers in this industry, I hold up music as the opposite. You look at an album cover for a band you don't know and an album you've never heard of, and you have no idea what genre it is, what kind of music you're going to get, because it is an open field. It's a more pure art form, the album cover art, that it's just some artist or the band or whoever made a piece of art to represent their music, but there are many fewer tropes. You could argue that like hair metal from the 80s or heavy metal. Maybe you could also argue maybe hip hop in certain areas has a look, and it's usually sort of the less polished look, and you kind of know what genre you're going to get a little bit. But for the most part, you have no idea. A U2 album, no clue what that music is going to be if you've never heard of U2. And that's hard to even comprehend because you're exactly right. You have a Led Zeppelin album and you cherish that art because it represents the experience that you have when you listen to the music. So, anyway, sidebar.
Wow. It's fascinating. What you do, you really have that one glance, like you have to hit it right away, especially nowadays with people's attention spans. You look on Instagram and people are scrolling within, a second, 2, 3
Oh,
seconds, maybe you get their
yeah,
attention, right? So,
yeah.
Adam, I'm curious, like from the first time that you were like, you know what, this is it. I'm good at it. I want to create art for movies. From
Mhm.
that, how did your company come about? What was the journey?
I guess by saying, I guess I did design it to manifest it. I decided I wanted to make movie posters. Had no idea that that was even a thing. No one ever does. Even to this day, people don't think of an ad agency designing a movie poster. They assume that the director makes it or somebody just it just happens. I was very pragmatic and very career driven even in college. And so I would go to the career planning office all the time and look for internships or look for whatever. And one day they had a copy. They got the Hollywood Reporter daily magazine delivered because this was in Southern California. And they had once a year, they do an award show that the Hollywood Reporter used to sponsor called the Key Art Awards. And it was the Key Art Awards issue, which had was a catalog of all the entries for that year for trailers and posters. And in it, because this is how old I am, the internet did not exist essentially. So they had all the agencies would take out ads and they would have their phone number in it, and that was it because there was no email. And so I just stole that magazine and I dog-eared it and highlighted all over it to see who the agencies were, and then I'd reference their ad and their phone number. I memorized all the agencies that did this thing, who had done what. But it wasn't quite that simple for me because the country was in recession at the time. And so I got a job offer in publicity at NBC coming out of college, and I took it because I was afraid about money and income, and I just wasn't mentally prepared to dive into a thing that I knew nothing about.
Adam, I gotta say, working in publicity at NBC, what an opportunity. Like,
Oh,
wow. It's like a paid
yeah,
education.
huge. It was, the universe manifests the perfect thing, and it was the perfect thing.
I love this story of how, like, one thing leads to another and it's not exactly what you wanted to do right away, but now you're at
No.
NBC. Like,
But it
that's
wasn't my
incredible.
dream job. I was not
Yeah,
happy at NBC.
of
Not that they were
course.
they were totally lovely people. It just wasn't publicity is not what I was ever wired for. It was not my thing. But my cubicle is right next to the photo department, part of publicity. And the photo department had a cubicle next to my cubicle that was where they kept all the photo archives. They got this system. And again, it's so hard to comprehend in this day and age how radically different the world of technology was and communication and connectivity. They got and now we are into the early internet and email and all that stuff is happening now in history. They got a machine that was meant to scan slides and upload them to the Associated Press newswire. And they were going digital for the first time to upload their photos. And so this machine came with this $50,000 slide scanner and top of the line Mac, probably $100,000 setup, which is like for a nerd like me, fantasy land. And it was sitting there in the cubicle next to mine, and no one knew how to use it. They were just like, insert slide here, press button, press button, press button, done. Insert next slide. And that's all they knew how to do. And I said, guys, I can help here because I know how to use Photoshop and I know how to composite. You can do a lot more. I can retouch for you right here. You don't have to go out to your advertising department. You don't have to outsource anything. I can just move over a desk and do it. My boss at the time was not down with that.
And how did you deal
So
with that? So your boss shut this down, but how did
shut
you
it
deal
down.
with it?
I said, well, okay, can I do this after I'm done working your desk?
Smart.
And she's like, sure. After I'm gone, go for it. I don't care. So I would work for her until 6 or 6:30, and then I would move over a desk and I would work compositing, photography, and retouching until 1, 2, 3 in the morning.
Wow.
Now, the upside of that was they paid overtime. I made a good living at age 23, 24, working 2 jobs basically. That's what it took to sort of figure out your own path. So I went from there to an easier going boss who let me. I took the next step, which was designing press kit covers and video cassette packaging, which they had done none of ever. I can just do this for you and give you a look and bring NBC up above all of the other networks when you send stuff out for reviews and your critics and all this stuff. And so I was a little mini ad agency of one inside publicity for like a year or two. Meanwhile, what I really wanted to do was movie posters. And that boss moved on to his next job in a different department that I wanted nothing to do with. And coincidentally, he had been in marketing at Miramax in the 80s and knew all of the agencies that did what I dreamt of doing. And so he was a wonderful human. We're still friends, and set me up on interviews all over town.
Wow.
I got rejected at every single one of them because I would bring my portfolio of work that I had done for NBC, which was constrained by budgets to be one color or two color artwork. Again, not really even a thing that happens anymore, but it used to be like, how many colors can you afford to print? So it was a lot of black and white, or black and white with a pop of red or whatever. And it looked, low budge. So after one of these interviews, at the end of it, I said, listen, what would it take to convince you that I can do this? And I said, if I went back and redesigned some movie posters for you, would that convince you? And the guy who was interviewing me was like, sure, like whatever you want, kid. Like, I don't care. And that was a Friday of, I think, Memorial Day, 3-day weekend. And I shut myself at the NBC offices for 72 hours and reinvented a portfolio that I just made up in fake movies. I suggest this to anyone wanting to get into my industry to this day. I still stand by it. The way to bootstrap yourself into it without anyone asking, without anyone paying. If it's the thing you want to do, just do it. Just fake it. As now an employer and someone who is looking for you to tell me that, oh my God, I love what you do. I want to do what you do. It's easy for you to show me. You don't have to tell me. You just show me. I don't need it to be like, oh, look at this Avengers poster I made using the logo from the Avengers poster. I'm using the artwork from this other event. It's like, no, make it up. Just make up something fake. And so I did that. I made up movie titles. I just made up movie genres. I used my own photography.
When you came back, what company was this?
I showed that portfolio the next week. So 4 days later, I went back to a company called BLT, which is still very much, they're the big fish in the sea in my industry now. They've done really well and done beautiful work.
So off of this fake portfolio that you created because you were going on
Yeah.
all these interviews and nobody was biting, and you
Yeah.
finally were like, "Let me just recreate this portfolio. I'm gonna make up movie titles, I'm gonna make it all new." And out of this, whenever you went to BLT, they gave you a job. And what was your position there?
I was an assistant art director. So they had three main creatives,
How old were you? Were the assistant art
20,
director?
25, 26.
Wow, that's
So
very
yeah.
young to get to have that kind of title.
Yeah, the title's a title. It was someone's assistant. But it was, again, still in that threshold era where the guy who was my boss was a very prolific, very creative director who did not know how to use the computer or was just learning because he had been in the era before. And so he needed a wrist. He needed someone to execute all of his ideas. And so that was the dawn of my real education in doing what I do for a living. And I worked there for 2.5 years, and he taught me everything. He was hard. He was a very difficult person to work for, but we got along. We figured it out along the way. And then went to another agency, also doing very well today. One of my competitors and friends. They're all my friends still. At least I think so.
There's enough for everybody in the universe. So, Adam, whenever
Thanks.
you were doing all of these different jobs and you were coming
Yeah.
up, learning about being a creative director, being assistant, like doing whatever, how many years before you had the idea to start the refinery?
I was happy as an art director. I was winning awards, doing beautiful posters I'm proud of. I was very prolific.
Adam, what company were you at when you were winning awards?
Well, from BLT, I went to a company called Concept Arts and had a really, really wonderful run with them. Met my now partner. I'm not alone in this endeavor at the refinery. I have a partner, Brad Hochberg, and we were both art directors at Concept Arts, and we were there for 6.5 years together. We ended up starting a print division at Trailer Park, which is one of the bigger agencies. At the time, they were only doing trailers. And so we pitched to them to start poster design with them and partner with them in that. And we did it. And it went fine until they sold the agency. And that's a whole other conversation about selling and what happens to a company when you sell it and what the challenges there are to the soul of that thing that your baby.
That's for our next podcast. We're going to talk about that. Don't mess it up.
Yeah, it gets messed up. I would say 90% of the time it gets messed up in my experience. Um,
You and your partner were building this part of the agency, and
correct.
then it got sold.
Correct.
And then did you stay there?
We stayed for another 9 months and then we're like, this isn't working. And we agreed to disagree. So we were formulating our exit with our employers and looking around at what to do next. A lot of other agencies were like, yeah, come on over here. And we were so burned by the experience of not being masters of our destiny and of recognizing that any agency is seeking an exit and looking to sell and all of that stuff. And if we weren't in charge of that journey, we would just be swept up like we just had been. And so really the only next step, I mean, we were in the middle of jobs, we had work to do, like we were going. And the only next step was just to take our machines or buy new machines and start it in my house and just we literally stopped work on a Friday, started working on the next Monday, job still in hand, client still active, and we just did it in my house because we were too scared to rent space and to make it that official. So we just were like, let's just plunk some computers down and figure it out.
Which is totally what Steve Jobs did. You're like early Steve Jobs, just do it in
Ah,
your house. You know,
yeah, sure. Yes, sure.
and Sarah Blakely from Spanx, they all did it in their house. Like you got to see if
Yeah,
it's gonna work. Makes
yeah,
sense, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
whenever you guys got together, how did the name come about? Were you guys just working in your house and you're like, oh, this is like a refinery, but we're,
No,
making posters?
no, we workshop names forever. I mean, hundreds, hundreds. It's a lot easier to name something if it's yours alone. When you have a partner, it's like you've got to find that Venn diagram of the thing that you both agree on. We couldn't do it. We couldn't find a name that resonated for both of us. We wanted it to be something that wasn't like print shop or poster house. We wanted it to be more universal than that. We also didn't want it to be like Adam and Brad Co. because that felt too restrictive and other people who came after us or joined us couldn't own that for themselves and be like, this is my thing. So we wanted to keep it neutral. We couldn't figure it out. And by the time we had to incorporate and sign papers and be a vendor for the studios, we still hadn't figured it out. So to this day, 20 years later, I get checks for Waldberg Incorporated, DBA the refinery, Waldberg being Waldman and Hochberg, because we're like, it's just a temporary thing. My CFO at the time was like, you'll replace it later. And of course, it's harder than you think. Once you're a vendor, on record for a client, it's harder to be like, just swap out the name. They're like, well, no, we have to do a whole new start over. In 20 years, we've just never bothered to start over. So actually, my company is Waldberg Incorporated. It's on paperwork only.
When you started working with your partner and actually making a living at your own company, what year was that?
2006, 20 years ago.
Exactly 20 years ago. Wow.
Yeah, 20 years ago, November, I guess. Although it's funny because I remember it getting so hot in there. At the time, Macs, they were huge towers. They were called cheese graters because they were all aluminum and they had these perforations all down the front and they just pumped out heat. They were so hot. And we had like 8 of them in my tiny little house and my air conditioning couldn't keep up. It was like literally a sweatshop. It was a sweatshop.
It was a refinery.
It was a refinery. Yeah.
So the Refinery Creative, can you just tell me about how that name came about? And then you were talking about the URL.
So it's the refinery in my mind. It is the refinery. And so we went looking for the refinery.com and it was taken. And we are trying to think of other the refinery what. And so creative was the thing, even though to this day I'm curse it every time I have to type in Adam at the refinerycreative.com or tell someone that over the phone for customer service. And what's interesting is that literally it was just meant to be the URL because I couldn't get the refinery, but the company is the refinery. But that URL makes the difference. And every employee since inception says, I work at the Refinery Creative because that's what their email says. That's what the URL, that's the website says. So we're the Refinery Creative.
I think it's a great name. It says it all. So, can you tell our audience a little bit about your company now? And like, it started
Yeah.
with 2 employees. How many people is it now? Like, can you tell me what you guys create?
First of all, we actually started with 8 of us. We took our team and we took half the team, as many as we could possibly afford to, from trailer park. And so there were 8 of us in my house from day one. We are now around 95 people. That's actually smaller along the way. A couple of years ago, we were doing movie trailers as well. Had a very conscious and loving uncoupling with our trailer group. So they are now a different agency. We're still very good friends and it's all good. I think we wanted them to have the best chance for success. And the Refinery as a brand is very well known as a poster design or print design agency that has now morphed and become social campaigns, digital campaigns, which are paid media. That is basically what we do. What that means in terms of what you see is we create the campaign, we create the look of it as artists that you see up all over town, bus shelters, billboards, online when you go to shop. We're just everywhere out there.
And
Maybe
it's
the
all
place
over
that
the world.
aggregates it
All
all
over
over
the
the world.
world.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. In fact, some of our largest clients and our longest running clients have been international departments at the major studios or the streamers. And so I'm very proud of the fact that some of the work you may never have seen, but was up everywhere in Paris or Tokyo or somewhere else. So it's fun to go to London and see our work up and stuff like that. But yeah, it's global and it's exciting. The other place it shows up is on all the streamers. We work for every single streamer. We work for every studio. And so if you go to Disney Plus or you go to Hulu or you go to Amazon or you go to Netflix or you go to Apple, our work is represented all over the place. I'm super proud of it. I still love it. I still get excited about the design of it all. Yeah.
And so, Adam, with this creative agency that you have built, what would you say is a piece of advice for an entrepreneur? It's just amazing to me that you were able to take your creativity and
Uh-huh.
actually monetize it. And not only
Uh-huh.
for yourself, but for your partner, for the people that you employ. I mean, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. So, what kind of like inspiration or advice would you give to others who want to be creative but want to be secure?
I will speak more generally than a creative industry and say one of the smartest things I ever did, not saying I'm very smart, I stuck to what I do well. I stuck to the creative and to being in the community as a vendor, having client interactions, an account executive. And what I did not do was any of the logistics of running a business. I did not set up the 401k. I did not set up the healthcare plan. I did not do payroll. I did not think I was going to do HR myself. But doing that takes thinking bigger than it's just me. And I think I might have fallen into the trap of trying to say, I'm going to bootstrap it alone if I hadn't started with 8 people, because starting with 8 people is already overwhelming. And I was like, I don't want to worry about the money. I want to worry about the art and the work and the thing I do best. And I want the money to be someone else's problem. So, did I take risks? 1,000%. So many. I double mortgaged my house in addition to putting everyone in my house. I took a loan out, a second loan out on my house. My partner did too. We put it into a bank account and said to my first employee, who was an employee before I was an employee, I was paying him before I started, a CFO, which call it what you want. But I'm like, set this up, build me a foundation that can grow. And he was and is a good friend and a family member. And I trusted him with everything I've got. And he was a serial entrepreneur. And so he'd done this game before. And so I just gave him all the money I had in the world. And I said, tell me when I'm on an end. And otherwise, I got work to do. And so that to me, if you think you've got some grand idea, a couple things. One, put your money where your mouth is. Don't wander around asking someone else to fund it, because then what are you doing? Now you're playing a game with money and you're wondering, how much of this can I own because it was my idea? But are you really ideas are so easy. Like ideas, I've got lots of ideas. Which ones am I going to put my money and my everything I've got into? So
You're invested. You have to be invested.
1,000%. And if you want someone else to invest, well, then they're invested more than you are. And so, shocker, they're going to be like, here, you can have 5% of the thing that you came up with, and you're going to do all the work for it. I'm going to own 95% because it's my money. So we put our money in, and then we stood back away from the money and stuck to the thing that we know how to do. And we paid someone before we even got paid, before there was another employee. He was employee number one, and I am to this day grateful to him and think that was one of the smarter things I did. But you have to be thinking big and willing to risk big to say, I'm going to pay someone else to do shit that I can do. And this was 20 years ago. Times have changed. There are platforms like Gusto or other sort of, we'll set up payroll for you and handle all your 401k, and it's easy. And it is. So you might be able to bootstrap it without doing the thing that I did 20 years ago, but I highly recommend you stay laser focused on what you're good at and don't think you're going to be good at everything and that you're going to be the most amazing HR person, because you're not.
Right, because at the end of the day, it's about your team. Even with, these amazing singers or celebrities or whatever, like they have a team around them. And as an entrepreneur, you need a team around you. And it sounds like that's what you invested in was your team. I'd love to talk about YPO for a moment because I know that
Sure.
you are very involved in YPO. And for listeners who don't know what that is, it's the Young Presidents Organization. It seems like they have a lot of mentorship. Can you just kind of talk about it? Because I'm just curious, like, what is the most valuable part about being in that organization?
It's a little different because it's an organization that's meant for business owners who have built their businesses already to a certain scale or size. And the bar is pretty high. I'm misquoting, I think it might be 14 million in annual billings and 50 employees or something. But there are other groups like it. There's one called EO, there's one called Vistage,
Pistage
there's
EO.
another one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
there's one
know
called
them. Yeah,
Tiger
absolutely.
21. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, but I'm just
So
saying for you because I know that I was so grateful that I got to DJ your wedding with Amy. It was so beautiful, and you guys are such amazing people, and like your musical taste is so cool. And I don't do weddings. Like a lot of times I will not DJ a wedding because I'm like, oh, they're going to ask for terrible music. But we had a party. It was so fun and such a
it was
celebration. It was amazing.
it
So
was a great night. It's funny because I have thought after the fact, like, God, should I have just worked the room a little more? Because at some point I was just like, I'm gonna be dancing for the rest of the night, so
everyone had a
people can let themselves out. I'll be here.
it was amazing. So
Yeah.
I noticed that you had like a second wedding for your YPO people. And so that's
We
why I was
do.
curious, what is it about YPO? Like, why are you so involved?
So the thing that YPO provides for me is maybe three or four things, a lot more. But one, it's education. It's being in a group, a peer group of people who've had struggles, who've gone through everything: lawsuit, bankruptcy, phenomenal growth and success, senior leadership they had had to fire or hire, and success and failure, exits. That may be one of the most valuable ones I've gotten, is because I joined it thinking I wanted to sell my agency and what my exit was going to be, and thinking, oh, I want to learn from these people. And one of my earliest experiences in YPO was meeting someone who just sold his agency, a creative agency, and he was so excited. And it was through the roof, like, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to get like the synergies between me and the other member companies in this new umbrella that I just became part of. It's going to be great, to the moon. And within 4 months, he's like, fuck them, fuck that. They can keep the rest of their money. I'm out. He quit YPO. He was just done. He was done. And it was like seeing that roller coaster, that off a cliff of just such a peak in a career, to just boom, straight down to like, forget it. And I've seen it happen a lot. And all of you private equity folks, please feel free to DM me and tell me I'm wrong and how you're different and how you're going to be synergized and just be the wind beneath my wings. I can't wait. But the people who buy companies are buying them because they think they're getting value for the dollar, or they're going to strip it for parts, or they're going to somehow find the efficiencies to mine out of, to squeeze the stone to make more money off of the same thing. Or if you can convince them, if you're the seller, that the business is going like this and it's going to keep going like this for the next 20 years. And you pay me 8 years worth and you get the next 12 after that, which is usually the pitch that a seller makes. So that's a very rambly way to talk about why I value YPO. And that's one example of lessons I've learned about running a business and about the journey that any business takes. That's one. Other kinds of education. We just had a session with one of the preeminent criminal defense attorneys in the country, giving us some sort of anecdotes and stories about his journey as a defense attorney in capital cases. So it's just fascinating and just an interesting lens. We get access via this network to people or groups that I wouldn't otherwise have access to. And then there's the social piece. And the social piece ebbs and flows over time. It wasn't always sort of central to my journey, the YPO group. But at the very least, it's a group of peers who can empathize with the struggles of owning and running a business. And a lot of your friends, if you're listening and you have your own business and you're starting, or you're in the middle of it, or wherever you are on the journey, as soon as you say, I'm a boss or I'm an owner or whatever the word is, there's a little bit of an air gap between you and your friends who aren't that.
Right.
And there's a little bit of a loss of empathy of the struggle that you have where, yeah, I made a lot of money last month. The month before that, I lost a lot of money.
Yeah.
The fear or the insecurity that comes with that is real, but all people see is, oh, but you made a lot of money last month, so must be nice. And again, if your friends are your friends, it's not a big deal, but you do want a peer group who can deeply empathize and know that fear and celebrate the wins without any envy or resentment. And again, not that any of my friends had that, they didn't, but there's still that insecurity in me about wanting that next layer of the onion in terms of relationships.
Sounds like to me like it's a support system, and it's,
Yeah.
some of the things that I deal with as DJ producer, and also, I have my little creative agency, which is nothing compared to yours, but we do social media management and all of that. But the things that I have to deal with sometimes nobody's going to understand but my DJ brother or my friend who does social media and she's an influencer. But whatever, it's interesting. You got to have that support system. So for you, it sounds like the YPO community is a real support when you're, I mean, who knows about exiting? Yeah, you could chat GPT it, but I guess that's not really going to give you all the ins and outs of it.
You're not going to see the pain or the joy. I mean, it's both. Of course, it's both. It's the American dream, right? It's the pot of gold at the end of the painful rainbow. And I'll tell you, that's the one thing I'm like, okay, if I don't exit with a sale, what else is there? And I got to tell you, YPO has been marginally helpful on that because that is what everyone aims for. And so they're like, well, what do you mean? Just sell for less or sell for differently? And that's a little more in the weeds on my particular business, but it's sort of what everyone aims at in entrepreneurship, I think.
So when you go to YPO, for instance, you have like a message board and you put in there like, "Hey guys, I'm thinking of selling my company or I'm dealing with
Yeah.
this HR nightmare or da da da," and then people like respond and basically help you if they can.
That's actually a great point about another layer of value that YPO adds, which is yes, and that is on a global level. I can reach out to a global network of members. I think it's 25,000 members. I might be completely off base. It's substantial, yeah. I think there are 11 chapters in the Los Angeles area alone, and that's one of the largest metro groups, I think, in the world. But each chapter has 60 to 120 people, give or take. I'm throwing out numbers like crazy. I shouldn't do that. So the network locally is large. The network regionally, nationally, globally is an amazing resource. I've had people like my mother was in Bali and tripped and fell and she needs medical assistance and like someone is there. There's a connection anywhere.
That's
So
amazing. Wow.
yeah, it's good.
It's a great network to be a part of. I'm just like blown away at the resources and just the information that YPO offers. So, Adam, I'm curious to talk about your passion for helping with the homeless crisis in Los
Uh,
Angeles. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I'd be honored to. My journey being actively involved started from one group that I'm now today, 15 years later, proud to be a board member on, LA Family Housing, that looks to permanently house families who have been unhoused. It is a developer. It buys and builds multiple unit projects all over LA, mostly in the Valley, or it buys up small complexes and serves as basically landlord with heavily subsidized rent or sometimes free. And then it offers supportive housing services, mental health care support, job retraining, obviously food support, everything around getting people back into a more stable place that they can raise their families in. My beginning with it was because one of my clients was on the board and would push hard on the vendors like myself, who were the agencies who serviced her studio, and would ask us to buy a table, or she didn't even have to ask. We all knew, and we were competing with each other, and we all wanted to be there for her and represent. And so it would be actually a super fun night. They do an annual award show. They just did theirs last week, actually, for this year. LA Family Housing stuff. And so I would buy ads and go to the awards and fell in love with the mission and the journey. That client has moved on from that particular studio and is no longer on the board, though is still involved, and I'm proud to it's my journey now, but I'm proud of helping out however I can. A lot of that is financial, just sort of, contributing, my partner and I contributing a portion of what we make back to it.
You're racking up good karma there. That's what you're getting some good karma.
Thanks, whatever it takes. And then the other group, actually a couple other groups that I'm part of, one came out of YPO actually, late 2019, regionally in Southern California. YPO members got together and said, "We're YPO members. We're smart. We're the business owners. We're going to fix anything. And so we're going to get together and solve homelessness." So we all carved up into committees. There was a permanent housing, a temporary housing, a job retraining, a mental health, and I joined them all. I might have been the only one who joined. I didn't join mental health because that one scares me. It's such a challenge, and I don't know what to do about it. To this day.
Yeah, I just, if I can comment on that, I've been sober 20 years and I work a lot in recovery, sponsoring women. And I help with the Friendly House, which is the oldest
Yeah,
sober living recovery home in the United States. It's here in
yeah,
Cheviot Hills. And we're doing our gala in October, and I'm very involved in that. So,
yeah.
what's the name of this organization?
It is called Dignity Moves, and it was one of the committees in this YPO group. And then COVID happened. The big, we're going to fix homelessness thing kind of got put aside, except for this one committee for temporary or interim housing. We kept going. And most of that is because one of the members, who was a YPO member out of San Francisco, still is, and she's still crushing it, Elizabeth Funk, had an exit, and so was at a moment in her career where she had time to give and had been in impact investing. This was a natural fit for her, and so she took the torch and carried it forward, and is still doing it, and created a brand around this thing. And it is hacking the cost basis for building temporary shelters, tiny homes, tiny home communities. And we just, again, happened to pull together the right group of people. One of our members built like this plastic walled temporary building structures, but they're strong and magnitudes cheaper than anything else. And he was doing it out of the Middle East, but he could do anything, and he leaned in hard. And we basically brought the cost to manufacture one of these homes down by, I want to say, a magnitude of 6, 8, or 10. It was a lot. It was a lot.
I'm just curious, why did you pick this one? Because I know at your wedding, you and Amy asked people to donate to various causes. So why particularly for you homelessness?
To me, emotionally, it's a toss up between that and anti recidivism. Getting people back to functional in the world after they've been incarcerated. That's the other one.
I mean, for less obvious reasons, everybody needs a roof over their head to do anything, of course. But sorry to, ask you such a big question. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but I'm just curious if there was something that hit home for you.
My dad lived at kind of the poverty level. He had a home, but more often than not, we were staying in the shack out behind the house instead of in the house, or we lived on his fishing boat for years.
Same. Yeah, my dad was an alcoholic and it was, he was an entrepreneur. I have love for him, but he was definitely should not have had kids because it was very unstable. When my parents got divorced, lived in the shack behind the house. Like, I can relate.
Yeah. And I think the thing that the belief in the world that's come out of that for me is homelessness could just as easily happen to me. Until I was in my 40s, I was a few paychecks away from not having money in the bank. Now, plenty of safety nets. I do not pretend to be in that economic stratosphere where I'm truly at risk or ever will be in my lifetime, but it resonates with me. And I do believe that none of us are special in terms of deserving better than anyone else, or that because I'm smarter than you, therefore I succeed more than you. I think that a lot of it is luck. I think that, you could say manifest and design, but I do have empathy for those who haven't had those opportunities, who just cannot have found themselves in a cycle that I don't know how to get them out. And actually, my current passion that if anyone listening wants to guide me on, I'm here for it, is homelessness prevention and the idea of keeping people in the houses they're already in. And it's a slippery thing because how do you say, oh, it's just going to take $5,000, which is apparently the average amount of money it would take to keep someone housed and to solve the crisis that they're in. And that's not a lot of money, given that paying per person once they become unsheltered, it's some astronomical amount, like $30,000 or $40,000 a year to keep someone alive who's on the streets with all the city's supportive services and everything. And if you just gave them $5,000 before it happened, it wouldn't happen. But I get that that comes with a host of risks about abuse of that money and of, did they really need it? Or are they just abusing the system because they're here with their hand out and all the things.
Very
So
nuanced,
it is.
very nuanced. So, just to wrap up, we're coming to
Yeah.
the end of our programming today. Thank you so
Yes.
much for taking the time. What are you designing to manifest in 2026? What's happening this year that you're excited about?
It's a crazy time in my industry and my world. I mean, that's a whole other 5-hour conversation about AI and Hollywood and graphic design and generative AI and all that fun stuff. So I am manifesting an organization that I can lead and be part of that is stable economically, can provide a foundation for its employees and work family that I survive with, and is positioned well for the future. Those are super vague answers, but I'll just say, AI.
And Adam, where can people find you? Where can they connect?
Sure. The Refinery Creative is our website. Adam at therefinerycreative.com is my email. And I'm on most socials as Refined Adam. Amazingly, no one was pompous enough to take that one. So I can pretty much scoop that one up whenever I want.
Nice. Well, thank you so much again, Adam, for taking the time. And yeah, if any of our listeners are interested in helping, please get in touch. We so appreciate you taking the time to be here today. And until next time, keep designing with intention and trusting the path as it unfolds. And remember, if you can hold it in your head, you can hold it in your hand. Now go out and manifest something beautiful. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for joining me on Design to Manifest. Each week, I feature extraordinary people living extraordinary lives who have designed the life they are meant to manifest. Sometimes intentionally, and sometimes unexpectedly, they share how success and purpose can unfold in ways they never imagined. If this episode inspired you, please share it with someone who might also be inspired. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.